I am guided by imagination, open to my creation, creating wins and celebrations. Don't be overwhelmed by information, more important than education. Be inspired by your exploration, on the path to your destination, leading to innovation. Yes, you are guided by imagination. Hello and welcome to this edition of the Guided by Imagination podcast. I'm excited because, first of all, I'm Jenny Edwards, your hostess, and I have an awesome person that I met, Sankrant Sanu. Welcome. How are
Hi,
you
thanks, Jenny.
today? Awesome.
It's wonderful. I'm in Seattle. It's beautiful, sunny. There's nothing quite like Seattle sunny day.
Oh, yes, Seattle. Beautiful. Well, I'm excited to share with our audience today more about you. And I met you at a really cool event in San Diego, and you were on a panel, and I was really feeling alignment with the things that you were sharing. And I thought that that could be really beneficial to our audience. So if you have not met Sankrant, then you definitely want to know about him. He is an author, publisher, a yoga and meditation teacher. And also, he has a technology background. He has 6 patents in computer science, and he is really active with being an advocate, also being a drummer. I think that's super cool thing to add into the mix. So, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners about you?
No, I think it's quite a list, and I always say, all these lists are for marketing purposes, so don't take them too seriously. What people do. But yeah, I lived a little more than half my life in the United States and about half of it in India. So I have a really good understanding of cross-cultural issues and how different culture perceive going about life. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's great because that was kind of the scenario of the conversation when we met. And I'm just always fascinated to learn about different cultures and, how we could even revolve this conversation about imagination into how was it, what do you see from your perspective with the different cultures? So I'd love to kind of open it up for you to share a story about how did imagination make a difference in your life?
well, I think one of the biggest thing that people might be able to relate to is that I was working on a corporate job. I was working in a big software company, Microsoft in Seattle. And uh, when in about 9 or 10 years, I decided that I will go and leave the standard corporate template and go do something else. And definitely imagination was a big part of that because I said, okay, let's say what happens if I stay in a company and 20 years down the road, I'm some senior vice president or something like that. But a voice was saying, so what? Like, so what if I've climbed the corporate ladder and I've made some big money in it? Like, how will it actually, did I make a difference to people's lives? And did I really fulfill my purpose? So imagining a different life led me to say there is life beyond the corporation. So I left quite early. I was only about 33 years old when I decided to leave corporate life and pursue learning yoga tradition and learning how to meditate and go deeper into the meditation practices and travel the world. I went to over 50 countries, wrote a book. So just kind of crafting an alternative path on how one can lead life, and that's been quite a journey.
That's great. Yes, I can also relate because I had come from a corporate job as well and just took a leap of faith to to leave that. It was actually a big corporate layoff. So it forced me to leap and really connect to my heart and what was my purpose. And that's such an important aspect because it comes from your imagination, right? There's nobody telling
Absolutely.
you this, do this path, follow this, do this next. I mean,
Exactly.
people might guide you, might tell you, but you ultimately have to listen to your heart, right? Your
Yeah,
inner
it's
guide.
much easier to follow the conventional way, and just kind of keep chugging along. And I was reading a statistic that a lot of people, retire, let's say in their 60s, and many people die in a few years of their retirement because they haven't really thought of an alternative life, and they've become so identified with the work that they had been doing, especially in a jobs like situation, that they don't know what else to do once they stop doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And and so I wouldn't say it's an easy path necessarily to say, okay, I'm not going to kind of chase the corporate rat race. So you have to figure out your own finances, you have to figure out your own, what are you going to do with all this time that you have, so it's something that challenges you in a different way than just staying in a job would do. So in a way, it's harder, but it's also something that allows you to grow a lot more because you have to really ask yourself, what is it that I'm going to do with my life?
Yes, absolutely. It's true. And you have to listen to that inner guidance, that intuition as well, which is
Absolutely.
an imaginary thing as well.
Right.
That's not a
Absolutely.
tangible. So how has your meditation and yoga practice maybe helped you connect with that part of you, like the more subconscious
Well,
mind?
I think it's really been the basis for it, because I find that the yoga and meditation practices allows me to kind of unplug from the matrix a little bit, and and just be, not be swept away by all of the trends and the comparisons. So much of our life, I find we keep doing mental checklists and comparisons of who's ahead and who's behind, and why am I better than this person? Why is this person better than me? Like all of this story that goes on into our head. And the yoga and meditation practice allows one to see just as a story, like the mind is making up some story. you know, it's
Yeah.
actually not necessarily leading to my happiness. It might actually be making me more unhappy because I'm caught up on this story about comparing myself to one person or another person. So I think
Mm-hmm.
being able to just see that, as we meditate, to see that all of these are just thoughts that are passing. All of these are just passing thoughts, and all of the it's like a dream. If I sit down, I see all these thoughts. If I look back in my life, right now it just seems like a dream, all these events that have happened. And we go forward in life with all these stream of events. So I feel that the meditation is in a way central to being able to be free.
I love that. I love that. I'm curious also because of your background with two different cultures. What do you notice? So did you grow up in India and then you moved to the United
Yes, I
States?
grew up in India. I came here for graduate studies, so I was about 22 years old when I came to the US.
Hmm.
And and I lived in the United States for about 34 years after that. Uh, and very recently, last year, I've started spending a lot of time in India, moved to India,
Great.
back again. So yeah, I've still spent more time in the US than in India, but it's definitely given me a good understanding of both places.
Yes, absolutely. I'm curious to know your perspective on the idea of imagination and maybe from your when growing up, when you were a boy, was that something that was nurtured in your community for having that kind of like playtime or imagination play, or was that something that was you know, constantly being like refocused to be, more studious or do your studies, or what was that like?
Sure, sure, absolutely. Well, I was very lucky. My father was a poet, and so he's published many books of poetry. So he himself was a published poet. So art and poetry and theater was very much part of my life growing up. So he would take us to watch live theater. We'd have all kinds of discussions. So many of the ideas and imaginations, philosophies were part of my growing up and part of our household. At the same time, there was like an Indian middle class emphasis on making sure I get good grades, and you have to make sure you do well in school so you can make a career for yourself, and so there was an undercurrent of that as well. But I felt that I was definitely given a lot of freedom to express myself and pursue the things I wanted to do.
That's so good. Yeah, that's important, especially since you had that more creative family background that was tuned into the arts and things.
That's right.
Yeah, I see that in my two little girls when I'll catch them like, making up a little story or a little scene with their dolls. And I was like, oh yes, yes, keep doing this.
I used to do that a lot as a kid. I was always making up stories. And in fact, it's funny because I was in software and technology, and then people asked me what, because I became an author and a publisher after being in technology. And people ask me, oh, like that's such a big shift. Like you were a software guy and you went to becoming an author. And I said, no, no, it wasn't a shift. I was always an author. I was just doing software for a little while.
Yeah,
Because I always felt that that was part of who I
your
was right from
roots.
the beginning. And in
Yeah, that's a
fact,
good point.
it's very interesting in this age of generative AI, even in software. My project in my undergraduate work in computer science, this was way back in 1989. My one-year project was a writer of interesting stories. I was trying to get the computer to write stories. Uh, and so now these days we are talking about generative AI and all of those things, but that was my interest even back then, even with computers, how do we make them write stories?
That's awesome. Wow. The origins. That's awesome. That's great.
Origin story.
Yeah, I would love to kind of hear your perspective on what if we were going to give the audience some kind of nugget that they could take into their daily life, something that they could do to maybe connect with that, because some of the listeners might be more of left brain and want to add more of that right brain into their life. And coming from your background, especially with the yoga and the meditation, what could they do that would help them really hone in on accessing parts of their imagination that they haven't been able to align with?
Sure, I think finding a practice is definitely a good idea. I myself am associated with this organization called the Art of Living, artofliving.org, and so you can go and find a workshop there. There's also silence courses, silent retreats, where you can go into silence for 2 or 3 days and really get into touch with that part of yourself. And also, realizing that life is passing, and if we have all these dreams that of stuff we want to do, this is the time to do it. Because sometimes we keep deferring, and I've done this a lot. We keep deferring, oh, it's going to happen sometime in the future. But life is so short. I was recently staying a few days at a friend's house, and he's young. He's the same age as I am, but he got diagnosed with cancer recently, and
Mm.
it's terminal. He's only got a few months, and he called me. I was in India, and I just wanted to spend time with him, so I just spent the last few days with him, and it's just so such a reminder of the shortness of life. I mean, he's my bud. He's wonderful, wonderful person. He's still happy and enjoying his life the best as he can, and with everything that's happening. And he's been very successful in his life. But at some point, in a way, it doesn't even matter because life is short. and it's passing. So I think if there is a carry on, it would be this memory that we are here for some time, and to see how you want to be happy in that time. Find a way to be happy, and that's really the important thing more than anything else.
I agree. Yeah, choose happy. Choose
Yeah,
that happiness
exactly.
and take and be present in the moment and
Absolutely.
live in today, seize the day, carpe diem,
Exactly.
because you never know what tomorrow holds.
We do not know what tomorrow holds, and this is the moment where all of the activity, the action, the moment for us to do something, and also follow, you know, I'm not saying you should go quit your job tomorrow. Some cases you might want to do that, but what I'm saying is that if you're unhappy there, if it's not fulfilling you, if you're really, saying this is not what I want to spend my life doing, then don't, you know, find something you do want to be spending your life doing.
Yeah, that gets a good perspective and a good reminder for everyone. Don't put your dreams on hold. Take
Absolutely.
action, get into action to help them become a reality. Because so many times, like you said about the retirement, and people don't know,
Right.
don't have clarity of what do they want to do when they're retired, and then they just kind of lay around and don't feel purposeful. And if you have a big dream, and no matter what age, just make progress on, you know,
Absolutely. I think
whatever it
age is
is.
absolutely not a barrier. In fact, I started learning to play the guitar in my 50s. So I'm now also becoming a guitarist. And
Yay.
I'm super thrilled about it. And I'm taking weekly lessons and all of that. So I don't think age is any barrier to anything, I know people there was a very interesting story. The person who started the ISKCON, the Hare Krishnas you've seen,
Mhm.
sometimes in
Yeah.
the US. I think he was almost 60 years old before he came to the US. He had never stepped out of India. He barely could speak the language. He had like $20 in his pocket. He had nothing. He absolutely nothing. And just started chanting Hare Krishna on a street corner and then grew this movement of millions and millions of people around the world, starting
Wow.
when he was 60 years old.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
It's amazing. Yeah, it's never too late. Just jump in and you kind of people activate that zest for life. I mean, even my mom, when she used to have a corporate job and she did the early retirement and she wasn't sure exactly what she was going to be doing except, buying a house and it really opened up musically a whole other opportunity for her. She started singing and she also learned how to play guitar and she started playing
absolutely.
with the band and doing these different jam sessions and she just loves it. It just lights her up. And
Right,
that was
exactly.
something totally different that happened in her retirement. So it's exciting things like that, come through and blossom.
Absolutely. And my mom also in her last years of her life, she was active, she was traveling, and somebody asked her how old she was. She was like, no, no, I'm not old, I'm young. So and so she had that zest all the way till the very end. And yeah, it was just amazing to see how she lived. And even in her passing, it was amazing. She was never sick. She didn't spend a single day in the hospital. She
Wow.
always would lock all of her doors and windows before going to sleep. But she unlatched a door to the house and went to sleep and didn't wake up. Mm,
Wow.
yeah, so she had
Very
even so much
peaceful.
awareness that she might be passing, and she didn't want somebody to have to break the door down, and she unlocked the door and went to sleep, which she never does. She was always very careful about locking up.
Wow.
Yeah,
Fascinating. That intuition.
yeah, that intuition, exactly.
Mm.
Intuition and also just coming from that fullness because I would spend a lot of time and in the last years of her life I was in the US still and she was in India. So I would go visit her for several months in the year, but for many months she was also alone. During the COVID period, for a long time, she was
Mm,
alone. And people would ask her, and like, how do you manage the house and everything? How come you're alone? And she's like, oh, I'm never alone. The divine is with me, and I'm never alone, even for a moment. You
mm,
know,
mm.
yeah. So having that fullness of being walking in consciousness
Ooh,
and walking in
yes.
awareness. Yeah,
Yes, I love that. And that goes well with imagination too, because she had that, connection to, spirit or source, that divine beingness, and that really allowed her to feel safe and confident.
absolutely. Right.
So it's all about the story, like you were mentioning, the story that we're telling ourselves. Is that story
Absolutely.
serving us or not?
Right.
And
Right.
for your mom, just choosing, my story is I'm never alone. Like I'm always
Right.
have that safety and have
Exactly.
that
Exactly.
grounding. That's powerful.
And then having, and the imagination also, the source of all imagination is coming from this higher self,
Mm,
coming from this sense of connection to something higher. And when we are feeling that connection, then all of imagination dawns within us.
mm.
Mm.
Ooh, it's so creative.
Mm. Like a
That's
download from
creative
the
languaging. The dawn of imagination.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm so happy that I've gotten to hear your stories and more about your life path and how that imagination has made a difference in creative thinking has really transformed your life into so many other realms of possibility. And I
Yes,
would
very
love
much.
for you to share is there anything else that you want to share or how can people contact you?
Sure, I'm quite active on Twitter or X, where my handle is at Sankrant, Sankrant. So you can just message me. Yeah, my DM is open, so people can DM me on at Sankrant, Sankrant. Um, I'm also on LinkedIn, although I'm not super active on LinkedIn. But those are two good ways to get a hold of me.
Okay, I'll put the links in the show notes.
Absolutely.
Yes. All right. Wonderful. Well, I
Great.
really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Namaskar.
you.
Namaste.
Yay.
Hmm.
Namaste. Bye.
Bye.
If you want to activate your imagination and creativity and have more fun in front of the camera with your photos and videos to market your business online or share your message to make a difference in the world, I'd love to offer you a complimentary 30-minute inspiration session, a Zoom room that we can set up and chat about ideas and inspiration to make your day a celebration with Guided by Imagination. Click the link in the show notes.